Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. Tonight's edition is the December 6th, 2013 edition, and we are being graced tonight by the multi-talented, and that's such a, that's really such a weak way to put it. The multi-talented H. Wolfgang Porter. He is a member of BSFS. He is a very prolific member. He's got several groups on there that he administers. He's got Pandorum Ultimatum. He has a very interesting group for those people who write, Self-Publishers Coalition, a lot of information on there about that. Oh, and the Dark God's Gift. And what else have you got, Wolfgang?
Oh, crap. There's also the fan page for a short story series, The Priestess. There's also the for script writers. There's the Masters 3X group.
I forgot about that one. Yep, and I'm even a member of that one, and I forgot. Yeah. I apologize, man.
That's all right.
Welcome to the show. You know.
Oh well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's do this. So where are you coming? Where are you coming to us from first?
Coming live from beautiful snowed-in downtown Blytheville, Arkansas.
And you said what? It was about in the 20s down there?
Yeah, 20s and dropping.
Yeah. See, I feel for you because you're just not used to it, you know. And because of your weather misfortune, I'm not going to even complain about us going down into the very low double digits. So where did you grow up in that area, or did you relocate to there? Where'd you grow up, man?
Actually all over the country. Initially, though, I'm a New York, New Jersey kid. We always did the connection back and forth between there. And then, one day we loaded up the truck and just moved out west and lived in New Mexico and a few other places, and then finally my parents settled here in Arkansas, and I stayed here for a few years. Went to university here, went to Arkansas State, and then after that, just started bouncing around the country until I finally joined the service and took off to see the world.
And you know what? I know that you were started out almost like a videographer or a cameraman in the service. Was that something that you picked up before you got into the service, or did you get into that when you were in the service? How did that all work out, man?
Well, when I was in college, I got my degree in fine arts, drawing and painting. With the auspices of becoming an illustrator. I did that for a minute, but one thing that was always kind of a requirement, for being a fine artist, was photography, because if you wanted to have control over how your work, like when you put your portfolio together, there's the standard portfolio where you just put all these images in like a folder, but you don't want to, at that time you didn't really want to carry all that stuff around, so you did a photographic one, and you'd have slides, back thousands of years ago when they used to use slides for those things. So, but the thing is, I didn't know squat about photography, and I was in the middle of a gig teaching public school, and I was kind of getting bored with that, and I wanted to go back to school to learn photography anyway. And then one day I was looking through some literature for the military, and then I saw they had the job photographer, and I was like, well, let's see, go to school for photography, get paid for it, and travel the world. Done. So that's how I got into it, and I'm glad I did. In fact, it was the job for me. I mean, if there was ever a job that was perfect for a person, that becoming a photographer in the Navy was definitely one for me.
And about what years were those when you did that?
I joined up in like '90.
Okay.
In fact, right around the time, shortly after I joined up, that whole stuff with the Gulf War started up. Talk about timing. And so all through the '90s, I spent I was in the service. In fact, I got out in '99, and so
Okay.
so the '90s, basically I spent traveling around the world and learning photography and videography and filmmaking and all that stuff. So by the time I got out, I was I loved what I was doing, and I wasn't about to take a gig, just working in the office, being miserable, doing, something that was probably productive, but, not what I really wanted to do. So, I went on and started my own production company, and eventually got a chance to go back to get my degree, my master's degree in film. So, and then once I got that, got back into production hardcore.
And so while you were in the service, I mean, what kind, what parts of the world did you get to see, and what kinds of assignments did you have for the military? Because, I think in terms of, military photographer, I think in terms of, okay, you're probably out there, I don't know, taking military photos, but I don't know what kind of subject matter, where did they send you? Tell us a little bit about exactly what you did in the service.
Well, not being facetious, but a lot of the places I went, if I told you, I'd have to kill you. But yeah, there was. Initially I was an intelligence photographer, and I went to a lot of a lot of really saw a lot of interesting places, and did a lot of interesting things, and so so I spent the first half of my military career, in intelligence, and then after that, I got a chance to go to the military's motion picture school. So when I went there, I switched out from intelligence to combat camera, and which and things, all the crazy stuff that I did on the intelligence thing, kind of went to a whole other scale when I got into combat camera, because with my intelligence background, I was farmed out quite a bit, in the fact that anytime there was missions where they needed documentation of something, whatever it was, say the SEALs or EOD or somebody was doing something that was really interesting or really covert, and they needed photographic or video documentation of it, they would send me because I had that background. So and also I was flight trained, so that that opened up quite a few more assignments that I could go on. So
yeah, but I mean the cool part though is when you say like a military photographer, people think you're running around doing newsreel stuff and things like that, but you could have been, and I don't really want to know the details, but I mean well, no, I'm serious. I mean, combat situations were not out of the realm of what you may have been called on to do, correct?
Well, actually, that was my, as a combat photographer, that was my primary mission, was combat documentation. But the thing is, the way the Navy operates is, they want to get as much out of you as possible for their investment. So, a lot of stuff I did was newsreel stuff. A lot of my footage, ended up on, ended up going to, to national networks and stuff.
Sure.
I still see old photos of mine, pop up in magazines, and newspapers now, when they need like archival, images or something like that. I still see my stuff pop up. So
you're. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I'm just saying that. But I did, did newsreel stuff. I did, ended up doing photojournalism for a minute there. So, with combat camera, I did the whole, the whole gambit. I got a really good opportunity to see how the entire military functions, and which was a real eye opener. Because when you're in the service, most of the time, all you ever really see is your own job, and so you never really get a chance to see how the big picture works. And there were plenty of times, I'd be sitting there in the same room where these big decisions were being made, where all of a sudden, the phone rings and it's the president, and at 1 minute, we could have been the whole a whole military operation could be heading in one direction. This phone call comes up. Next thing you know, instead of turning left, we turn right. So that's how that worked out.
Well, that almost sounds like, if nobody would come and kill you. Well, I'm serious. I mean, it sounds like fodder for a good book. Because, I mean, let's be honest. We've had documentaries about news personnel who are embedded with the armed forces, for very different, for different battle situations and things like that. But to see things from your perspective would be even a layer deeper, because you were actually part of the military. So, I mean, it does sound interesting. I respect the fact that you can't tell everybody what you did, not even about, those two women and, well, never mind. But, I mean, I'm just, but I mean, it sounds like it was.
Funny thing about that is you're joking.
Well, of course, because I don't know, because I don't, if you tell me, you have to kill me, and I still got some other stuff I have to do. But I mean, when you think about that, when you came out of school, out of the service, did you miss the excitement, or were you ready to move on? I mean, you had the skills. Obviously, you had the skills. Otherwise, they wouldn't have kept you in there. But I mean, how did you feel when you got out? Was it time to step out on your own and do things, kind of what you'd been thinking of maybe before you even went in, or I mean, how did you feel about it when you came out?
When I got out, it was time for me to get out, because I'd been operational, like, out of the 9 years I was in, I was operational 7, and those other 2 years I was in school or doing some kind of training, for missions that I was going to go on, or jobs I was going to do, or whatever. So I was busy the whole time, which was cool, but come toward the end, I was burnt. I was burnt to a crisp, and plus the fact that there was that whole thing in like Kosovo was going on, and I wanted in. In many respects, I'm glad I did. There was a lot of political crap that was going on. They wanted me to go to another job that had nothing to do with what I had been doing and was really good at. And I'd always promised myself that the minute that stuff turned into a job, I was done. So they were offering me this thing that was going to have me working at far less capacity than I had been working at, and I was like, nah. So I realized too, I was burnt out. I was taking riskier and riskier assignments, and I said, let me get out of here before I get myself killed over something stupid. So when I got out, it was interesting. I was like I said, I was glad to be out. Even now, I miss the work. I don't miss all the other, one thing about it, the military is definitely its own culture, and it's a whole other system of doing things. But the one thing that's the same in the military as in the corporate world or in the academic world is all the political bull that goes with it. So
sure,
that stuff never changes. So I don't miss any of that stuff. But then too, when I decided I wanted to get into combat camera, when I saw I had a really good opportunity. One of the assignments I was working as a lab technician in a photo lab. Even though I was still doing the intelligence thing, that was like a separate thing that I was doing. I got a chance to meet the guys from Combat Camera, and I'd always heard about these guys, and I'd always, because they're like for the Navy, you always hear about. It's funny, the Combat Camera is the best kept secret in the Navy, because you always, whenever you see the Navy's, their ads and stuff, they always show the SEALs and the carrier and whatever. But that's all you ever see. But there's so many crazy cool jobs in the Navy, and Combat Camera is probably one of the best ones. And the more like qualifications you have, for different things. Like me, I was flight trained, but there are other guys, photographers who are dive trained. Some of them were jump trained. In fact, I was trying on my way to go to school for Combat Camera. I was doing everything I could to take a side trip to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, to the paratrooper school, so I get paratrooper training. It was just couldn't get it. It was just that one signature I just couldn't get to sign off for it. So, but it worked out anyway. I still ended up doing a whole bunch of stuff, and still ended up jumping anyway. So it was like, I just didn't have the wings for it. That's the only thing that sucked. But when I got out, I was ready to to do my own thing and take what I had learned, because I wanted to start. I wanted to get into the film and television business. But the one thing we did, with Combat Camera, we did a lot of consulting work. So I got a chance to help consult on some TV shows. A couple of them I would never admit to because they were terrible. But the thing was, it was nice to be able to get up there and see how they do things. And I saw how Hollywood does stuff, and I was like, wow, man, you guys spend all this money and waste all this time and barely get anything done. You guys get paid for it. That's cool. But But the way we did things with Combat Camera, everything was like, was just like bam, bam, bam. Here's the plan. Here's what we do. Let's go. Let's get this done. Bam. And then, whereas Hollywood, they don't do that.
In Hollywood, yeah, I think even here, the film work that I've done here, it's all hurry up and wait. Get there at dark 30 in the morning. Make sure you're there. You have to be on time, and then you stand around and you wait till 11 o'clock before you actually do something. But you saw that from the outside.
Yeah, exactly. So when I saw that, I said, well, that's not what I want to do. And plus, another thing, it annoyed me the way the system works there. We had one a Navy chief photographer who was like as a Navy chief on Combat Camera, he was like, he was the equivalent of a senior producer or an executive producer. Basically, he would put together a team. They put together, all the resources they needed, to go on a mission or shoot for that matter, and then pack up everything and go anywhere in the world, get it done, and then come back, and that's how it worked. Well, he was also, because he was a reservist, he also worked, as a cameraman, on films. But he had been working at that for like 15 years, and he had only finally gotten to the point where he was like first camera. And but whereas in the service, he was like a top dog, And even for me, when I got to Combat Camera, it was funny because like the first year I was, the first 6 months I was there, I actually, went there as a cameraman, but because of the way the job requirements were, they needed a photojournalist. Now I didn't know squat about photojournalism, but the thing was I had all that background in intelligence photography. Plus I had, I already had my degree in art, so I knew about composition and all that other crap. So they said, all right, fine. Can you write? And I was like, yeah. All right, you're a photojournalist for the next 6 months. So that's what I did. And I learned how to do photojournalism. And then as soon as I got back from that mission, they said, okay, we're putting you back in video. So I went from being basically a junior grip, basically, a junior grip. You know what they do. They, the cameraman says, do, and fix this, put this together, and, and all that stuff. So that's what I did. I went from junior grip to producer in a year. So in a year I was already taking crews out, and across country and and out in the world, So by the time I left there, I was a senior producer. So, but then you get out and then you've got this huge body of work and huge parcel of experience, but you try to parlay that in Hollywood, and they're like, well, you gotta start from scratch. And I'm like, screw that, I'll just start my own thing, and that's basically what I did, So, because I was like, I don't have time for that, it would have been cool if I had just gotten out of high school and was gonna learning the ropes from scratch and all that stuff. That would have been cool, but it's like, look, not trying to say that I was better than anybody, but the thing is, look, I've already done that, I've already been through that part. Now, I'm trying to work, at a higher level. And and they're in respect out of, for them, for the Hollywood system. There are people who, they pay their dues and they go through the long haul and they wait till they get the opportunity and and then again you get people like who don't do that. They just meet the right person and they say, hey, we're just gonna put you in here, and then they just all of a sudden they jump off. Well, I knew that wasn't going to happen for me, so I was like, well, it's good. I'm just going to get in there and I'm just going to do what I got to do. So that's basically how that worked for me.
So what was the first thing that you did once you left the service?
Sat on my ass
I was going to say that you could talk about, yeah.
Sat on my ass for about a year and tried to figure out, what kind of move I was going to make. Because I did, I did the traditional thing, applying for jobs, and
right.
in the industry. Please, I got a lot of callbacks. I got callbacks from Disney and a bunch of game houses. This is like I said, this was back in like '99. When like Sony PlayStation was really starting to, was really taking the world by storm. So there
Sure.
were, a bunch of those gaming houses that, and they were finding out that, having video reference, for a lot of their games was the next big thing. So I got a lot of callbacks from them, the different gaming houses. I even got a couple of callbacks for interviews for when the ISS, the International Space Station, was going up. They were looking for video people. I got callbacks for interviews from them. But one after another, I'd gotten out. Had been in California, but there was no way I could stay there, with my savings and not have a gig, and even though I knew people, I basically was like, California, put it this way, if you're from the East Coast, that California is either a place you're just going to absolutely love or just going to absolutely hate. And I liked it. So I was already in trouble, and so I figured the best thing to do, since I didn't know where I was going to end up, I came, my parents were still in Arkansas, so I came back here for a minute, figuring it's in the middle of the country, whatever happens, because I was applying for everything, on the East, West Coast, South Coast, and in other places, even as far as Dubai, I was applying for gigs. So if anything happened, I was just going to say, just throw my stuff in the bag and take off, and that would have been that. But, one thing after another, gigs started slowing down, like the callbacks started slowing down, and, people, loving my experience and, loving my resume, and, but it was always came down to the same thing. Well, we don't want to pay relocation fees. I'm like, dude, just give me the gig. I'll live in my car until I can get a house,
Right.
No big deal. I don't need you to supply me with a home. Just pay me so I can do, give me the work. I'll take care of the rest. But there was always some excuse. And then a friend of mine who was a headhunter, I pitched him my resume and said, hey, man, what's wrong with this thing? He took a look at it. He says, everything. And I was like, wow, is it written bad? He says, no, the problem is you know too much. You got too much experience. People look at this and they say, crap, I'm going to have to pay this dude, and he may take my job. So I was like, well, how do I dumb it down? He says, I'm not really sure. He says, so at that point I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to do something because, the savings were starting to get a little low and there weren't any gigs coming in. So I started, I took what I had left and I started my own business. So.
And you started it out in California?
No, I started in Arkansas.
Oh, you started in Arkansas. Okay, so all right, you go through the whole Hollywood thing, and I tell people when they go, oh man, I can't wait to get out to Hollywood, and then I tell them, oh, why is that? Because Hollywood is the place you go for your dreams to die. Most people don't Well, I'm half cynical about that, but I mean, I'm entirely honest because less than 0.5% of the people who work in L.A. in the movies are employed full time.
Oh yeah.
Everybody out there is parking cars, tending bar,
and yeah, man.
Or like you said, living in their car until they think that big break is going to come.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it sounds like you got a healthy dose of I'm going to do it this way because it makes sense to me, and I'm not going to go out there and waste my time banging my head against the wall. So when you started up your own company, here in, I guess, what they call that, the lower Midwest? Well, I'm not sure. The South. All right. Well, I was trying to, upgrade you. I was trying to upgrade you. But I'm curious.
Arkansas, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I mean,
it is what it is, baby.
So how long did it? I mean, how soon was it before you started getting your own work and starting, obviously to build your reputation?
That was another thing. It took a minute because, like, okay, so you get the business started, okay.
Right.
And of course, 10 times out of 10, you don't have enough money to to really get everything you want. Forget what you need, just what you want. So I started doing everything. I just started playing off all my skills. At the time, I built computers. Like when I was in Comet Camera, I learned how to build computers because we worked with Macintosh systems, but we worked out in the field with them. So as much as I know there are plenty of Mac fans out there. Please, out there, we'd be having one of those their editing machines and their graphic machines. That sucker would break down all the time. So I was constantly learning how to keep those things running, and then also. I also learned how to do, do field repairs on really high-end video equipment. So I started parlaying that stuff when I got back here. I initially had bought my own when I was still in San Diego. I bought my own first bought my own computer, but I couldn't afford a Mac. I bought a PC, and so
right.
The first time I was I wanted to get it upgraded. I took it, back to the store where I got it, got an upgrade, and I was like, crap, that cost a lot of money. I said, now it just cannot cost that much money to do this stuff. And I realized, because I'd already been working on the Mac system, I said, well, it really wasn't that hard. It was just a matter of knowing what the gear was. So little by little, I started tinkering with that PC, and then I just learned how to build them. So after that, by the time I started up my business, I was doing a little bit of everything. I was doing photography stuff, private, photo sessions and things. I was doing house calls for computer repair. Oh, please, you'd be surprised how much money you can make off of people who just don't know, the basics of keeping a computer running. we're not even talking like, major repair. I'm just basic maintenance. So that kind of kept me going. And then I ended up, things were kind of flattening out, and I got an opportunity to get some funding, to actually go ahead forward with and get my get my company, fully funded, from some angel investors. And I had spoke to them, the day before. And they were telling me, hey, everything was good to go. The paperwork they were going to send me out was on their desk. They were looking at it, and they were going to send it out the next day, and we were going to be good to go. I was going to have some financing for my, for a business. So I was like, yes. So that next morning, the building they were in got hit by a plane and fell down before the day was over.
Man.
So that whole thing went down, and I was in a bad way because I'd already made some commitments, and I was like, staring down the barrel. I was like, holy crap, what am I going to do? And strangest thing was the next day, here I am, got my little harmonica out, getting ready to start, singing the blues and junk. I get this call from this government program that I applied for, like when I first got out of the service. And they called me and they said, hey, you won this, you got approved for this sponsorship to go to school. Are you going to school or what? I mean, they were ticked off at me because they hadn't heard from me, since '99. But the thing is, nobody ever contacted me. Nobody ever, I went there, I put in the paperwork, and I never heard from them again. So I'm like, So I'm hearing them, and the guy, like I said, the guy kicked off me. I'm saying, well, yeah. So next thing I knew, I was busting butt and to try to get into a graduate program, and I ended up getting I ended up going to college of Savannah College of Art and Design for film and television, and and went on a sponsorship. So I was like, cool. So that helped quite a bit, and through there I ended up making my first my very first feature film, and from there things kind of started getting a little better. When I was school, I came back here because came back to Arkansas because was where the business was registered. So, and then also at the time, my overhead was like nothing. So that was a good thing. And I had for all of 2004, I really didn't have a whole lot to do. So when I was that particular summer, I said, well, I've got some projects that I've had sitting around for a while, and one of them was a book I had been writing for about 10 years off and on. And I said, well, look, why don't we just take the summer and just finish the damn thing? So that's what I did, and that's when I ended up finishing my first book, Tales from the Long Road. And so then after that, I ended up getting, in fact, at the end of 2004, I got my first subcontracting, try that in English, subcontracting job, and did some production work for the VA. And I did some contracting work for them, and that started the ball rolling. 2005, got some jobs here and there, and then I got my real big break in 2006 when I got a call from this company that works for the National Geographic, and I'd done work for Discovery Channel before, but when I was with Combat Camera, so somehow somebody heard my name or something like that, from that, and they called me, and I ended up helping them out with a show called Megastructures. I don't know if you ever heard of that. So I ended up doing an episode with them, and then the company that they showcased in that episode, they called me and said they were looking for someone to help them with their training programs because and they were right, they needed help back because their training program was dismal at best. So I literally got in there and turned their training program around from night to day, and so then I just started getting more corporate work, and things were going well, and that's how basically I got the ball going. And in between that time, I ended up writing some more, another book and another 2 books, excuse me. And then eventually I got turned on to the BSFS, and in between, making short films and doing corporate work and working on other TV shows that I'm not even sure if I should even admit to. But did a couple of episodes of Toddlers and Tiaras, so, we got to make that money, I guess. But, yeah, so, I mean, that's how it all got going, it was one little thing at a time. But the funny thing is, it wasn't like it was just this big deluge of work all at once. It was, there were long periods, and they were like, okay, what do I do next? And, so... And to me, what I found I had to do was I just had to stay busy, even if it was working like really small projects, just, to kind of keep that ball going. But yeah, once you get started, though, you really can't sit around, because if you do, nothing happens. And so.
Well, the bills do have to be paid. and well, I mean, they do. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, nobody wants to have to work out of their car. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. This is the December 6th, 2013 edition, and we're talking to H. Wolfgang Porter, multimedia threat, combat film guy, writer extraordinaire. I guess what I want to talk to you about now is let's talk a little bit about your first book. Okay.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about, and just a little bit. Don't tell the whole story.
Oh, no.
But tell us a little bit about, where you got the idea. What was the concept? How did you conceptualize doing that first story? Because a lot of people, some people just jump right in, and some people kind of edge into it, and they've got work that they kind of started. What was the evolution of your first writing?
Well, my first book was Tales from a Long Road, and in brief, it's about this culture, approximately 5,000 years ago, when where a whole civilization, where humans and elves, were living together, but there's this whole backstory about how the reason that they live together now is because they fought each other, almost to extinction, at 700 years before. So the world that exists now is the world they built since then. And now at this particular point, there are elements that are coming along that are trying to undo that. Things have been peaceful and prosperous for so long that now you got some folks that are like, whoa, we just got to mess that up.
I was just going to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say. So, in the central character of that story is a bounty hunter named Wolfgang, and his whole involvement, he gets involved in all the political aspect of that of that scenario I just mentioned when he gets himself involved in the rescue of a kidnapped ambassador. The local government, is doing a secret deal with a foreign government, and their ambassador, the ambassador that's sent, gets kidnapped by a rogue terrorist group that gets wind of it and is trying to cause a rift between the local government and the main government of the ruling empire. So Wolfwalker, ends up getting into a brawl with two of the guys that were supposed to do the job, and they get taken out, and just by accident, somebody thinks that they think that he was the one that was hired to take the job. So he's like, well, screw it, I'll just take the job. So he takes this job and he goes on to rescue this ambassador, and come to find out there's this huge, massive plot going on that he's basically, foolishly stepped into, but now he's a part of it.
So, what drew you? I mean, obviously this has huge fantasy elements in it. What drew you to the genre? Yeah, well, what drew you to the genre of fantasy?
Well, I've always liked it. Always liked sword sorcery. That stuff was always cool. Especially as a teenage boy. I mean, big muscle swords, half naked chicks. What's not to love, right? So so I always got into it. But the thing was that I always found annoying was, amidst all those big muscle swords and half naked chicks, there weren't very many blacks involved in it. So
right.
I was always like, well, what about us? So I was like, oh well, shoot, we'll take care of that. So even my character, my main character, he's half human and half Sekeline, and the Sekeline are basically a race that shares a common ancestor with elves, but whereas elves are like humans, in the fact that they could be have different kinds of skin complexions like humans do. The Sekeline are black. I mean, but they're not like black like African black. I mean, like jet pure black because of a mutation that from where they live, from living underground, and then also and living in a world that that has what's called a black sun. So in order for them to survive, they end up developing this black skin to keep them from perishing in this environment. But so he's half human, but he's also half his mother was a Zulu witch, so he's kind of black if you want to call it. So, that makes for interesting, elements as well as seeing how the Sekelim are considered an outlaw race in the world of Earth where he finds himself. So even though he'd always been an underworld character, but now that he's involved in all this heavy duty political stuff, with all these political intrigues, he's got the double sword of Damocles hanging over his head, and the fact that, okay, if they find out, who and what he is, he's dead, So, but yet the thing is, he's been very successful at handling a lot of their missions. So, so there's just this weird dichotomy he has to live with.
And so, what was? I mean, you said that was a novel, correct?
Yes. And
did you get? I mean, what kind of feedback did you get from your initial, your first offering, so to speak?
It was, it was pretty good. I mean, because people hadn't really seen, because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I reinvented the fantasy genre, because I didn't. I mean, let's face it, Tolkien set the mold, and everybody else has been kind of following it, So
sure.
And the thing was, my influences, were Tolkien and Howard and Moorcock and several others, So so mine is kind of like this blend, with my take on it, So like I said, so I didn't reinvent this stuff, but the thing was, what I did was I took the fantasy genre and I took it into the thing I like most is film noir. So I basically came up with fantasy noir, if you want to call it, just want to pigeonhole it like that. So my stories read more like detective stories, because there's always a mystery, there's always a criminal or terrorist element. In fact, we could probably even say there's probably a pulp element to it, because because I write for mature audiences. There's always the elements of mature elements in there. So so it's not just it's not like Harry Potter-esque, where it's more the fantasy for pure fantasy. I mean, there's a lot of real elements in there, because there's one thing I love about for me, good stories make you feel like you're standing there, and that's what I try to do. So a lot of people who read it like that, and but of course I had my detractors. There were some that that couldn't. They couldn't really, how do I say it? They couldn't really follow why. Well, why is he black? Why is Wolfgang black? Because he is. That's why. But for the most part, people like the story, and the main thing that some of the positive criticism I got was people really got into the political aspect of it. Because though there are elves and men, I mean, there's real politics going on between these two groups. I mean, the way the story, the way the history of the war went. Granted, the elves lost the war, but they won the peace. They ended up, they nearly got annihilated, but through negotiations, they ended up, still being the top dogs as far as the political and social thing goes. But the thing is, humans, breed like rabbits. So there's still this power struggle between them, but they've been able to manage to keep the peace for 700 years. And so so people who read that really like that, because you really don't get that with Tolkien and stuff. I mean, his whole thing is a whole other dynamic. There's this big bad guy who's coming to destroy everything, and everybody's got to get their crap together before he does that. Well, the struggles that are going on, in the Eastern Empire where where this story takes place, all the strife and the struggles are really coming from within. So which for me that makes it a lot more intriguing, and easier to write the stories, because one thing I found, the worst villains are not the ones coming at you from outside, but the ones that are coming up behind you that that live next to you or standing right next to you. So that's and a lot of people who've read the stories, they really get into that.
Sure. And you mentioned that you wrote this for mature audiences. This is probably not for preteens or anything like that, correct?
No, not preteens. But teenagers could read it. I mean, I was reading Conan and the original Conan books. I think I was around 15 or so. So I mean, and then, and back then they were pretty risque, man. I mean, because even though you don't really see it in the movies, Robert E. Howard talked about Conan doing his whoring and all the other stuff. So I mean, they didn't go into like hardcore detail, but they got the point across that that everybody around there wasn't innocent. And so
right.
And then also I used to read what was his name? Carl Edward Wagner. He wrote the Kane series, which basically was Conan, the version of Conan for adults. Okay, I mean there wasn't like hardcore sex in it, but there was sex, and then there was and the stories were far more mature and far more graphic in many respects. So in fact, the case in point, there was one story where the lead character had to fight this necromancer who was trying to who had kidnapped some girl, and the plan was part of the plan to bring some evil thing into the world was to kill the girl and then make her woman after she was dead. So so you kind of figure out where he was going with that. So so I mean I was reading that stuff like 15, 16, 17. So I mean so these books that I write I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with somebody that young reading it, but generally they're for adults. I mean they're for adults.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of your short story series that you have on BSFS so that people can check those out. What was the first series that you started?
The very first one was the Priestess, and that's the story of a goddess who has taken human form, and through the course of the story you find out that she's actually even though she's taken human form, she's mortal. But there's this paradox in the fact though she's mortal, she has all her powers as a goddess. So in the process of being mortal being a goddess in a mortal body, she has to learn how to all this so much restraint, and to help her do that, she's married to what is called her protector, and his name is the Valley Knight, and he's this warrior who is basically there to protect her, because like I said, even though she is a goddess, her mortal body can be killed. So he's there to protect her from mortal threats. Whereas anything godly, they better bring their lunch, because she'll probably be hungry after she gets finished, beating the crap out of them, But but those stories, that story in general is also for more mature readers, and it takes on and those are told from the aspect of like the old if you ever we've all read the old Greek mythology and probably Chinese mythology, Japanese mythology, and all these other. But when you read the stories before the 20th century whitewashing, so to speak, they're really pretty graphic, as far as sex and violence and
incest.
The general morality of the stories and even the consequences. I mean, you talk about what was that story? The Greek myth, Oedipus Rex. I mean, the guy, ends up, inadvertently, killing his father and marrying his mother, and ends up suffering for it. He ends up getting sent to Tartarus for that. Even though he had no intention of doing that and no knowledge that he was doing that. he was, cursed to do it from birth. But the Greeks like, screw that. You still did the deed. You're going to hell. So the stories are told from that aspect. For the more adult aspect, and there's excuse me. So in that that context, the priestess, she lives in this place she helped create called the Valley Realm, and the Valley Realm is this kind of like this nexus of between all worlds and all realities, and humans and minor gods and even demons live there, and they all live in kind of like this village environment, and every now and then major powers come through there, like early in the stories. You find out that she knows death, and rather intimately, and they don't necessarily get along very well, So, so those stories, also later on in the Priestess Saga, which is a series of 6 stories, you see the characters. They end up doing time travel, and they end up, because they end up, on their adventures, they end up time traveling, and they end up affecting, how the whole Valley Realm gets created. So there's a lot of twists and turns, and I even now when I go back and reference the material for when I write the new stories, I'm like, man, how did I come up with that? Like, where did that come from? But that's the fun part about writing, the priestess stories. I have full license to go anywhere in any direction I wish, and it's all in the context of balancing mortals living with gods. So that's basically the basic premise of that. How would that be? How would that work out? And how would it work out? An all-powerful goddess being married to a mortal man. How would it work out for a man? A mortal man to be married to an all-powerful goddess. The dynamic in that marriage would definitely be different. Those I haven't seen that in a lot of things. There have been stories, obviously, that have done that, like what Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. Here these dweebs married to these powerful females, but due to the conventions of the time, they're really tamped down. And of course, they made for humorous situations, but in the case that I'm writing, they're not. This woman is not tamped down at all. In fact, she has to tamp herself down, and so which makes for definitely interesting situations and insights for that matter. So,
in the course of your world building, how do you come up with these ideas? I mean, do you conceive of the environment first, or the creative universe, or do you come at these stories with a storyline already in mind?
Well, it really, I know it sounds like a cop-out, but it really depends, because sometimes, I'll get a wild hair and I'll have this whole line, come up, I'll come up with this whole line of, okay, well, this, that, this, and then I kind of pin it all together. But like with the priestess, that got started, a former member of the BSFS had a challenge on one of his groups, where, he had a picture of this thing going on, and he challenged everybody to write a short story about it, just from that image. So when I took a look at that, and the priestess story just started rolling out, I ended up writing the initial story for it in like about 3 hours. So when it was done, I was like, wow, that was actually fun. And so, but the thing was, later on, I was like, I kind of want to know what happens next, So at that particular time, during that summer, I was staying with my mother, because she had gotten terminally ill, So I was, I became her caregiver, and she got to the point where I couldn't even work. I just had to stay with her almost 18 hours a day. So, there wasn't a whole lot to do, and where she was at, I didn't have my computers, and her condition was I couldn't really bring my computers there because it was made for an unsafe environment for her. So I ended up writing the stories on my cell phone.
Wow.
So, the thing is, I wouldn't have nothing to do, so I was like, okay, well, I just started cranking through, and I just, like I said, I wrote them on my cell phone, and I, wrote the first volume. I wrote the last 2 stories, and like the whole 6-story Priestess saga. I wrote, like I said, I wrote them all on a cell phone. So the thing is, as far as building the worlds, with that, I just kind of built upon it, just from, as the story started progressing, I was like, okay, well, what happens here? Okay, well, this, so, and there was no real set outline or anything like that, Whereas with the Tales from the Long Road story, I've taken, I usually put notes down and really try to, make logical points, for, what's happening next. In fact, in the recent book, like in each book, I always have like a glossary and rogues gallery, that kind of backs up all the stuff, all the information, that everything you read in the book, it's kind of like a reference, section. So you can, and the way I write those is, where it's almost like a story in itself. So this last one, it's like really huge in the fact that, it's almost this separate story in itself, just all the information that backs up everything there. But, so I mean, it just depends on what, how I come at the story. If it's just like the Priestess, when I write those all on the fly. I don't, but now, like as I get deeper into the stories, I have to go back and reference. So little by little, the freeness of that is, it's kind of getting bogged down because I want to try to keep consistency in the stories, but I still try to keep those free.
So it sounds like they come to you fairly well formed. So your creative mind seems like it's operating all the time, and then you can take whatever inspiration you see and probably crank out something pretty quickly, correct?
Yeah, and then too, like earlier you asked me, like when you were talking about my service and how that would make a good book. I use a lot of the material from a lot of things that happen to me. I when I get stuck on the spot, or if I want to put something in that I say, well, how would this happen? And I remember, well, what about that time? Oh yeah, well, and then I'll just kind of doctor that up, to where it'll fit, in the story. So. Mm-hmm. So I mean, so some things, sometimes, there'll be some crazy stuff like, man, where'd you come up with that? Well, so
if people read your stuff, if people read your stuff and they kind of read between the lines, they can get a little hint to the kinds of things you were doing that you can't tell us about.
Oh, definitely with the Tales for Long books. Definitely with the Tales for Long Road books. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your most recent work is is it the Pandorum Ultimatum that you've done most recently, or
Pandora Ultimatum is the second one, and that's my first sci-fi first foray into sci-fi.
Yeah, no, it's straight up sci-fi. I've been reading that, and I enjoyed it. Yeah. What was the inspiration for kind of doing a pivot around to more hard sci-fi?
I have to lay the blame on two of my fellow BSFS members, Thaddeus Howes and Ronald T. Jones. They're prolific writers in their own right, but they write mostly sci-fi and stuff, and they write some really good stuff, and it was. It's kind of like a professional poke in the ribs. I was like, I could write that. Like, there's no way I'm gonna let these guys keep writing these circles around me in sci-fi, and I not at least try to write something. So So that's basically how that got started. But the thing was, I wanted to make sure that when I wrote something that did something to sci-fi, that I did, I followed the same precepts, even with fantasy. Because even my fantasy stories, there's excuse me, there's all that speaking. There's a lot of I try to keep it as real as possible. I mean, granted, magic is not necessarily real, but there's a lot of historical reference, from ancient cultures and stuff. So I try to make sure that I try to keep it to where I can suspend the reader's belief with just enough realism in there to make it believable. So with sci-fi, I wanted to make sure that whatever I put in there, it might be fantastic, but I wanted to make sure that there was at least some kind of scientific principle behind it, so that if somebody would read it and say, well, I don't know how they would exactly do that, but it sounds like it would work. So I wanted to make sure that I had that, and I did that with the Pandora Ultimatum.
Ultimatum, yeah. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the December 6th, 2013 show, and we're speaking tonight, whenever you're listening to it, to H. Wolfgang Porter. You can find a lot of his work, some very, very good work, on the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. And also, let's talk a little bit about you started the Self Publishers Coalition on there as well. What was the impetus for doing that? Was that kind of a community outreach, or well, just tell me what your original genesis of that was.
Truthfully, it was really pissing me off that there's a lot of really good information out there, and I was seeing on the site where people were asking questions, and they were getting good information, but it was all it was coming from so many different directions, and it wasn't in one place. Now there was another group on there set by an administrator. I can't remember the name of it, but it did sort of a similar thing, but it was mainly for book publishing, whereas the SPC, the Self Publishers Coalition, covers not only print and and electronic media. We also talk about film distribution and online distribution and all the new means by how you get your stuff out there. Also, we talk about press releases and everything that's necessary to get your work out there and try to make a little money from it, and also a lot of legal stuff, so keep you from getting into trouble.
And now you've got a number of members in there. You got 100 and some odd members in there. What are some of the things that, because I've noticed, one of the things that you put up there was a very, very important tax tip for crowdsourcing any of your projects.
Right.
And the long and the short of it is that crowdsourcing is investor money, and you better watch how you handle that, and you better mind your legal P's and Q's, otherwise you're looking for trouble. Well, actually, you're not even looking for trouble. It's going to find you.
You're going to get it. Yeah.
The fact that there's so many people in there who are participating in that forum shows the value of what do you call it, aggregating that kind of information in one place. And for those of you listening, there are a number of forums on the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website devoted to any number of different subjects. And the value of that is, in many cases, you're not going to make the same mistake that somebody else did if you pay attention. There are a lot of pitfalls in being a self-publisher. There are a lot of pitfalls in, just about any endeavor that you have. Why not learn from somebody else instead of making a mistake that winds up costing you? Do you have any war stories in there that you want to talk about that did you badly and kind of said, this would be good. This would be a good thing if I let other people know about?
Well, fortunately, Not many major war stories. I mean, of course, even though because there's certain things that are going to happen to you as a self-publisher, even though you've been warned, they're going to happen anyway. One is like when I first made my first film. The technology was changing, for how you put out DVDs. Well, I had at the 2003, 2004 time frame, where the software for you to make your own DVDs. I mean, and we're not talking like those little corny ones you make for like home movies and stuff. I mean, where you make a full-on professional DVD, with menus and all that stuff. That stuff was just coming out. So, I had learned how to do that, but the thing was the technology hadn't made the jump quite yet to where you could go from, making those menus to making all your content to the actual pressing of the DVDs and the material you needed. So I still need to go to a secondary service to do that. Well, I had, a producer friend of mine had a good insight to a place where I could get that done. So I went on and did that, on the auspices of, getting my DVD pressed out to get it out to start selling it. Well, I got all the material that I needed. I got all the DVDs pressed out, and the technology changed to where I needed like a straight up, DVD burner. Okay, so then I did that. I got a DVD burner, and the whole process, of trying to just get to the point where I could take my content, burn it to DVD, and have it, ready to go out. That whole, like I said, during that whole year, that whole process kept changing. So I was, so little by little, I was getting behind. So meantime, I had all these damn DVDs, that were all printed, and had all the, the DVD jackets and all the stuff printed out. All that stuff was ready to go. But the technology kept changing, and so it was going to, I rapidly saw, I was, at that particular point, I was already $1,500 into this. And I'd also, when it finally got, finally started getting a grip on it, I actually bought my own duplication system. So now I'm like into this, almost $3,000. And meanwhile, the technology, the software and the technology kept changing. So finally, I just said, forget it, And even though now I still use my part of the company, we still duplicate our own stuff. We still make our own DVDs. But the thing was that whole process, I had to go through. In the meantime, I still got this like several boxes of these DVDs, brand new DVDs, blank ones, all printed up, ready to go. They just need the menus. But the thing is, I've moved on to other projects. So eventually, one day I'll go back and actually finish that up. But the thing was, you have to really watch out for with that. And things it can happen with books. Lots of people I know that publish. Most self-publishers can't publish their own books as far as the actual the making of the book. Even though there's equipment to do that now. That if you're willing to spend the money, you can actually do it. But the thing is, most of us have to go to a second or tertiary source to get that done. So you can end up spending a whole crap load of money to get your book made, and then have a bunch of them sitting around because you don't have the distribution network to get them sold. So in that respect, that's a particular award story. But overall, the main thing I wanted to make sure was that people knew, like, could learn from the stuff that I had already been through. Like here recently, for my for publishing my third book, I had to go through the whole process of getting ISBN. Now, my first two books, I didn't have to do that. The service I went through, they provided me with ISBN. Now, of course, I knew that was their ISBN, but most people don't understand that if you get your book or whatever ISBN through a service, it's theirs, not yours. Okay, so if you don't have a problem with that, because that means that ISBN is always associated with the secondary company that published your book. If you don't have a problem with that, then that's not a big deal. But later on, like say, there may be an issue with film or television rights, and it may come down to because that ISBN belongs to this other company. If there's not something in your publishing agreement that says you still have those rights, even though that ISBN is theirs, there's always some chance there could be some kind of problem. So I end up buying my own ISBN. So the thing is, the process I went through that, I was like, oh, this is a BS, If you didn't know what, fortunately I knew what to expect, but when I was doing it, I was like, man, this is a BS, So I said, well, people should know about it. So, one of the reasons by that time I had already created the SBC, and I put that information out, and a lot of people, responded to that because they didn't know, they didn't know that was the case, and there are other pitfalls like that, with like take CreateSpace with like they have the Kindle, you hear these days you hear when you write a book, if you plan on going on publishing out to more than one media, like say you want to do more than print, okay, say you want to go to ebook, you want to go to Kindle and Nook, iThingy, what was it, the iStore or something like that?
Sure.
Or say you just want to go, you say you just want to go straight to PDF. Okay, well, for that same book, or God forbid, you print, you get it translated into another language. For all those versions of that same book, you need an ISBN, a separate ISBN. Okay, so that can be cataloged, properly. But the thing is, what people didn't know, like say you get your you take it and you get it done for Kindle. Well, Amazon has their own nomenclature for those books anyway. So you don't even need an ISBN, but they'll sell you one. But you don't need it. So I mean, once you put it in their system, that's but people didn't know that, and they were like, "Well, I paid X amount of money for that." I was like, "Well, you got ripped off." So having that information, is 3/4 of the battle.
And what people don't realize is that, you have so many people who decide, well, I want to do X, write a book, write a comic, whatever. And, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com, and especially people like you, are so valuable in that you are a resource that they probably couldn't pay for.
Exactly.
Well, no, I'm serious. I mean, when you think about it, there's several people on there who are like that, and I give advice, but I always give the caveat at the beginning. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but there are a lot of people who have done this, done that, published, gotten, actually published their own book to the extent of getting an ISBN because they did not have a fulfillment house that did that service for them. And what does a fulfillment house do? What's the value in a fulfillment house that takes care of your shipping and handles your relationship with Amazon so that you don't have to sit in your basement counting books and mailing things out and running to the post? I mean, seriously, people don't understand that when you become a content creator, unless you're very, very lucky and you get a publisher out of the box, whether it be a music publisher or a book publisher or comic or whatever, if you're not lucky enough to get a service provider right out of the box, that's you, okay?
Yeah.
That's you. That's all you. You have to do all of that, and the first thing you have to do is make sure you know what the hell you're doing.
Yep.
A lot of people don't, they don't know, and the worst thing you can do from a legal perspective is bull ahead and just do what you think is right, and then come to find out you're going to have to pay heavy dues for it later. So, thanks should be given to you for realizing that other people may not know those things and providing a forum for people to just, I mean, even if you just kind of page around and look at what other people are talking about, look at your posts, things like that, people can get a good idea of the process of getting, certain tasks done and the things they should be paying attention to. And so that's the beauty of having a social networking site like BlackScienceFictionSociety.com and having you drag yourself over there and put yourself out there and get that content out to people. So, you should be commended for that. And for those of you who are listening who have not published a book or have not done a movie, and we'll talk about your movies in a minute, there's a wealth of information out there that you might want to look at, and unless you're just one of those people who just know so damn much that we're going to be laughing at next year because your butt got in a jam. If you're one of those, go right ahead. Well, I'm serious. Let's take the one about crowdsourcing. Most people don't realize that when you crowdsource, every single person who sends you money is an investor.
Exactly.
People don't know that. They think, well, I'm going to take this money, and I'll tell you a quick story. I have a friend here in Chicago, and she writes books. I'm not going to tell you what kind of books she writes because everybody's got their own taste.
Okay.
But she was out there asking, I think, for $25,000 so that she could get her last book done. Well, when you ask for that amount of money, that's a significant sum. That's an SEC IRS sum of money.
Right.
And you damn well better have your infrastructure put together before you even go and do your crowdsourcing. Otherwise, it will come back and it will haunt you. Because you know what? The IRS can do anything they want with you. If they decide to send you to Bolivia for picking coconuts or to pick coconuts or whatever, they will do that, and there isn't a damn thing you or your family can do about it. So that's valuable information, and most people don't know it. Most people will go to Indiegogo or I don't know what's the expensive one.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, Kickstarter. And they're gonna put something up, and let's say they make their they make their goal. If you don't realize, and if you don't get people's social security numbers, if you don't get all of this stuff that you're supposed to get in order to treat them like an investor, which is exactly what they are, you're asking for trouble that sometimes is just too hard to unwind from. It's easy to do something proper ahead of time, even though it may take a tad more effort, but it's awfully hard to get out of trouble once you're already in it. So, thank you for that. I invite everybody to check out the Self-Publishers Coalition on BSFS if you want to know a little bit more about the legal expectations of crowdsourcing, because it's not something that people ever think about. Or they let's put it this way, they rarely think about it. So let's look at you've done movies, you've done a bad TV show that we're not ever going to know the title of. So why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe the first couple movies you worked on, and what kind of experience was that? First of all, doing it in the service has got to be different than doing it as a civilian.
Oh,
definitely. So I mean, what when you started doing maybe your first couple of movies, what were the biggest kind of transitional kinds of attitudinal and business related things that you found being out in the open market and not in the service?
The toughest thing that I found right off the bat is when you're in the service, everybody knows why they're there. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and there's a certain amount. There's a tiny amount of shucking and jiving that goes on, but everybody knows. At a certain point, all right, quit screwing around. We gotta get this done. With civilians, man, oh my God, it's like you. If you're lucky, you will run into some straight up professionals, But for the most part, you gotta. There's on my page on the excuse me on the Black Science Fiction Society, in the photos. How there's a photo in there that shows those memes that show about different professions. Well, I put together one for the independent filmmaker, and it shows exactly what the crap that I have to go through when I make movies. And and one of the things in there's a picture, where a woman is breastfeeding a baby, and I say that that's what I got to do with actors. And there's another shot in there where you see a cheerleader, half naked, at a ball game. I got to do that to promote the movies. It's just that's just the way it is. There's stuff you got to do, and then when you deal with civilians, most of the time they're all over the place, and if you're not prepared for it and not willing to deal with it, it's aggravating, and end up. A lot of times, you see you see directors and producers, are real, for lack of a better term, real bastards. It's because of that. But then again, too, you also, you as a director or producer, you have to understand that you're going to be dealing with people who may be very good at what they do, but they're not necessarily professional. You know what I mean? You can be an expert in your field, but you could be totally unprofessional about it. Whereas the thing is, people might be like, what's the difference between that? Well, a professional knows what they got to do. A professional knows that they, if they want to get paid, they not only have to do that, within a certain amount of time, they have to, show a certain level of creativity, and they have to show a certain level of professional pride in their work. And above all else, no matter what happens, they got to get it done. Well, you got a lot of folks out there, who are very good, very, very good, at what they do, but yet all those other things, they ain't trying to hear that, So, and there's a lot of the folks you got to kind of coddle them along, and come on, let's get this done, and especially now in this culture, where everybody gets a trophy, everybody's like, well. You got grown folks, man, that are sitting there stomping their feet. Well, why am I not in charge of this? Well, that's not what you were hired for. You were hired to do this. You got to talk to them like that sometimes. So that was a tough thing for me because, in the service I was like a straight up A-type personality. Hey, we got to get this done. That whole bit. And that worked. Whereas I have to watch myself, because, I'll be working with civilians and, there's times you're like, I just want to go, I want to go full gunnery sergeant on them, and, try to, light a fire in their butts, man, but it doesn't work that way. You have to, but when you get to a certain point, though, it's like you have to just get to where you say, look, I need you to pick up the pace, or I'm going to have to let you go. Of course, then when you get to that thing, when you get to that stage, then people are like, well, wait a minute. Well, why is it, so that's a whole other animal. So that was for me, that was the tough thing, was, going from that transition. In the military, you don't have all that, it's just, look, dude, you don't want to do, there's a stockade, or we'll shoot you, something like that, Whereas, with the civilians, it's like, you have to find coping strategies to help your civilian workers become fully productive.
Yeah, somehow in the back of my mind, when you were just telling us that, I heard your voice going, "What is your major malfunction?" So, and those other words that I can't use on the show. Yeah, but okay, so essentially, there's a whole different discipline, and that's pretty obvious because when you're in the service, you have to perform. It's not a choice. It's not a matter of, I don't feel like getting up and doing it today.
No.
And that had to be kind of a difficult transition for you. Nowadays I would imagine. You've been out for what now? 13, 14.
How many? 13, almost 14 years.
Yeah, so I would imagine you've probably at least hit your stride in terms of how to deal with recalcitrant people who just don't want to do. I find not paying them works exceptionally well.
Oh,
When somebody comes to me,
even in that respect, to me, I think though that one of the harder things is that and another reason why I created the SPS, SEC was to try to tell these people about the business side. I mean, because let's face it, most of the people on the BSFS are some of the most creative people I've ever seen, but most of them also don't know jack squat about the business side. And these days, being the days of being a creator, alone are over. I mean, they're done. Today, if you don't know how to do the business side, you can create all you want. Keep that stuff on the shelf, leave it in your basement, but you're not going to get out there in the world and get it to where it needs to be. If you don't know the business side, and more often than not, if you're coming at this without some major support from, like you were saying before, from a publishing house or a film studio or something, a major studio or something like that, where they're just going to be shoveling bucket loads of cash at you, you're going to have to do this stuff yourself. And the thing is, there's so many ways to end up in just crazy amounts of trouble. I mean, and it's all BS. But the thing is, you got to know how the system goes. We talk about copyrights in the SPC a lot because the punishments for copyright infringement are insane. It's like just the basic penalty, the bottom line penalty is $50,000 per instant of infringement. So all of a sudden, let's say you made your short movie, you sold it on DVD, you sold 2,000 copies. Okay, come to find out, there was one little thing in there that you forgot to get permission for, and then the person, the person or company says, hey, you didn't get permission for that. You got two choices. Either you take it out, which at this particular point you can't do, or we file against you for copyright infringement. Well, you're going to lose because you didn't get their permission and you weren't able to work out a deal after the fact. So now, 2,000 units later, you're looking at $50,000 a whack because you made 2,000 DVDs, and that's per instance. So that each time that thing appears in all 2,000 of those episodes, all 2,000 of those DVDs is an infringement. So now you're staring down the barrel of a crazy amount of money, and that's the basic one. I think the maximum goes up to like maybe 120,000 or something like that. So you could be staring down a life-ending amount of money.
And that also points out why, and I hate to say this, but a lot of people just don't do it. But there is good reason for you to consult with an intellectual property lawyer. And people go, I don't want to spend that $200. I don't want to spend that $400. And then all of a sudden, because they didn't do that, they owe $50,000 to somebody, and then they're crying the blues when in fact doing your due diligence is such an important part of getting those things done, of doing the business, of being in business. And a lot of people just don't. And the resources are there. The information is out there. This is not the rocket science part of the business. This is the due diligence part of the business. And when people don't go and do their due diligence, when they don't, when somebody says, I'm going to do a comic book and, I'm going to make my character, I really like the cowl that the Caped Crusader, that Batman wears. Maybe if I just change the color up a little bit and do this. And then somebody, of course, DC Comics is going to protect their brand.
Right.
And they go, but it's not the same thing. And then all of a sudden a jury says, well, it's close enough that you're going to have to come up with some money.
And that's the thing, too, that people need to understand, that, creators need to understand is that when it comes to copyright infringement, the burden of proof is on you, okay? Because if somebody's mad at you and they want to accuse you of copyright infringement, they can do that. But the burden of proof that you didn't is on you. You got to prove that, and that's where where it costs the most. And But the thing is, if you've taken all the steps, if you got your work copyrighted, if you got your, your whatever it was, whatever imagery or whatever that was in there, copyrighted or trademarked or service marked or whatever, if you got release forms and things like that, that you're supposed to have all that. So, in case somebody comes up with that, you just, you whip all that stuff out. Here's our documentation, this, that, and the other. So it comes on you to prove, you have the documentation to prove that you took all the steps to keep from, infringing on somebody. So, if you've got that, more often than not, juries, and judges will rule in your favor. But if you come up there with I don't know or I didn't know this, you're dead, because the way things are now, like you were saying, there's too much information. It's too easy to Google this crap. In fact, in that thing you were mentioning about the crowdsourcing, that article I put in there, I put a reference article where a film funding accountant, he wrote an article about this, about these rule changes that talk about how you get zapped by the SEC, if when you start with the monies you make from crowdsourcing. He's got a lot of legal and accounting ease in there. And I said in the post, look, hey, read this stuff. Yeah, this stuff's going to make smoke start coming out of your ears and probably the screens go blank. Google that crap. Look it up. I mean, because these days there's no excuse not to know. And in court, that's what they tell you now.
They've always said ignorance of the law is no excuse. You're listening to the Genesis. Yeah, you're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. This is the December 6, 2013 show, and we're talking to H. Wolfgang Porter. What were the first types of films that you did? Were these for yourself, or was this pickup work that you did? When you started getting into the film part, after leaving the service, what was the entomology of all of that?
Well, mainly it was, it was just work. It was like, corporate. Did a lot of corporate films because I had a strong documentary background from the service, and so did a lot of corporate work, and mainly did pick up work as the grip or as assistant camera or something like that, and then eventually I started making films on my own. I already had the knowledge of how to do all this stuff. In fact, the funny thing was, even though when I went to film school, quiet as kept, it was really an excuse to go make a movie. A rather elaborate excuse, but the thing was, of course, school was a great place, and I learned quite a bit, and SCAD was a wonderful school and a wonderful experience. But basically, I went there because I knew that I couldn't graduate unless I made a movie. A lot of schools like USC and UCal and UCLA and a lot of others, that were NYU. You go to these big schools, because they have big wonderful film programs. But what you don't know is, more often than not, they'll only do so many films a year. And so, you may be lucky enough to have written the script for it, but you won't get to direct it. Somebody else will end up doing that, or somebody else will end up producing it. So, but where at Savannah, their thing was like, hey, you came to film school, make a freaking movie, So I was like, cool, I'm with that. It was a lot harder, and I had to, a lot harder and a lot more money. And that's another thing too, that I try to make sure that people know. It's like, especially on the SPC, and even in the other group I write, the Masters of Three Acts for script writers, you're going to spend some money. You're not getting out of that. There's no such thing as making movies or books or comics or games. There's no such thing as doing this stuff for free. You do not get out of this. All that crap you see on TV where they say, oh, well, they get like remember those old Mickey Rooney movies, you know, where they'd have like the gang and all that. And they'd, come on, gang,
Sure.
let's go. You know, like bull. You know, that stuff. That's hang on a sec, somebody's trying to call me. That stuff doesn't work. I mean, you got to fork over some cash somehow. You know, even if it comes down to buying the gear or something. So, you know, and the deeper you get into it, you know, the more money you're gonna have to spend. You know, so so having that knowledge up front, you know, helps. And you know, by going to film school, I found that out. You know, I mean I knew it because I've been working, but the thing was, you know, it's a whole different story when you're an independent filmmaker. It's a whole other ball game, man, because you know you've got to balance not just the creative side, but you've got to balance the business side, and you've got to do it all at the same time. And you know, to keep yourself out of trouble, you need all that information that, you know, we've been talking about. You know, to back yourself up, and you still got to make the blasted movie. You know, so by the time I got to making my own stuff, you know, I'd already been a producer for a while, so you know, it was kind of a natural thing. So it was just a matter of picking what genre I wanted to make, you know, because I already had the background and had the access to, you know, making films. So it was just a matter of, you know, okay, so what do? You know.
Well, okay, so tell us a little bit about your first movie. I mean, the first one you actually produced and got done.
The very first one.
Unless it was porn. It wasn't porn.
No. Well, no.
Okay, just checking.
I never got involved in that. You have too much legal stuff to get involved with that. Money's good, but way too much legal stuff. But my very first film was called Appointment with Mr. E, and what it was about was this guy who average guy whose luck is just, you know, spiraling downward, you know, and then one day it just gets to the point where, you know, he gets zapped with one more thing, and he just you know, he blames all his troubles on evil. You know, it's all evil's fault. Evil did this to me, damn it all, you know. Well, he gets a phone call, and, you know, for a consultancy group, you know, that wants to help him with his problems. And, you know, he figures they with all his legal and financial troubles, you know, it probably wouldn't be a big deal, you know, that they would find it out. So just on a whim, he's like, well, you know, things can't get any worse. I'll go check him out. Well, he goes to check him out, and they know quite a bit about him, much more than they should. And come to find out the reason why is because it's actually evil. Evil heard him talking smack about him, so he's like, well, prove it. You know, you say all this stuff is my fault, prove it, you know. And that's how the movie goes, you know. And evil takes him, you know, on a journey similar to, what was his name, Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, where they go back through his life, you know, and see, you know, see where he, you know, how's this my fault, you know, and then ultimately, you know, when after all the evidence has been compiled, you know, evil even interrogates him, you know, during the process, and you know, when all the evidence has been compiled, evil challenges and says, okay, well, all right, so you know, the premise of all this is, you know, has always been because evil's pissed off. You know, the main reason evil, you know, has come on to him is like, hey, none of this is my fault. You know, I don't tell you people to do the stuff you do. I just whisper in your ear. You can ignore it or you can take it up. That's on you. I don't make you do anything. But you know, he's mad. But evil is mad because Hollywood, you know, always has this notion that all it takes is one man to whip evil's ass, and he's like, all right, you're one man, whip my ass. So evil challenges, you know, this guy to a duel. And you know, he ends up literally having to fight evil, and it takes it. You know, and of course, you know, evil does not fight fair in any way whatsoever, and there's some really interesting twists and turns in there. And there's a couple of spots in the movie, you know, where I actually had people screaming the scream, you know. So that was interesting. You know, that the whole process of getting that done. In fact, just getting that script past my my advisory board, you know, was a real challenge too, because I mean, it's the what is it, the materials. Me personally, it was like 10 years ago now. I think it's dated. But the thing was, it was really controversial, because the guy has part of his problem was he got zapped by a gold digging wife, and there's some exchanges in there between them that are really hardcore, and then there's some things that happen, like I said, evil does not fight fair, and there was a lot of stuff in there. I had to really wrestle these folks to the floor to get them to approve of it. So, but the experience, but that was a good experience in the fact that showed me what was going to happen if I dealt with a studio system. Because you do this when you work with the studios, man. You got to go through that. You've got investors that you're going to have to do your tap dance for, and then if you've got a studio back, and bottom line is if they're writing the major portions of the checks, you're going to have to you're going to have to say, hey, you want the soft shoe, or you want you want me to put my taps on, because you're going to have to dance for them if you want to make that money and go under their banner. You're going to have to bend over to a certain degree. I mean, of course, you get to a certain point where creative or financial differences aren't going to aren't working out to your not so much your favor, but to your liking. You can always walk, but just be advised, there's all that legal crap that goes in it, goes with that. So, so that, so going through that experience was, and then making that film was a real experience. Also, that was another place where I learned, right off the bat, dealing with, civilian, actors and crew members was a whole different ballgame.
And so this you were actually working with someone else's money in order to get this one done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my sponsor, they, and I put up like half the money to make it.
Sure.
But my sponsor was covering the rest, and so I had to do put it this way, I had to do all but all but fondle them, to a certain degree, if you know what I mean. Had to do everything other than that, And there was a spot there I was like, am I gonna have to go warm my hands up or something?
Okay, all right.
It didn't get that bad, but it got close,
But in the whole process, though, I mean, you said you heard how the audience reacted to the movie and things like that, so obviously it got done, correct?
Oh, yeah. The movie got made.
And, hey, is there, by chance, is there any place people can go and check this movie out?
Not yet. In fact, I'm currently building rebuilding my company website, and the plan is to put it out, online, and chop it up in episodes. Because I've been seeing with like Netflix and things like that. That's been a real, been working really well. So that's the plan for that. In fact, that was the movie I was talking about earlier, about how we had all this stuff ready to go to put it out on DVD, and just one thing after another kept coming up to where I just said, look, man, I'm starting to throw trash cans full of cash at this thing, and it's not working out. So. But now with the way the distribution methods have changed, now it's not going to be that big a deal to put it out. It's just a matter of how, when, and how we're going to promote it to put it out. But it's definitely going out now. So that's the thing.
Well, that's great. I mean, like I remind everybody, be sure to obviously post notices so that people can check it out. And do you think this may make it into theaters at any point? Are you going to have have some screenings? No screenings? Okay.
Well, actually, in 2004 it did do the film festival circuit. I got it into like 3 film festivals, and it got good reviews. So I didn't win anything, unfortunately, but I got some good reviews though. So it's been before audiences, and I've had some private screenings, for it, where we actually got like a small, it wasn't really a theater, it was like a what do you call it? Like not conference room, but in between a theater and a conference room, if you know what I mean.
Okay, sure.
Like it was like a large screening room. Because there was for that one it was like 100 people in there. So it wasn't like a full-on theater, but you get the point. Focus group, yes. Put it out, focus group, yeah. So
okay, and that's another instance where people may not know the ins and outs of the business, and the fact that yes, you can make a movie, yes, you can even get a movie funded, but if you don't get a distribution deal or something hangs you up, legally speaking, all that money goes for naught.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's another thing too. In fact, that which is great. Which is glad you mentioned it. We were talking about things that hold you up. Well, one thing you need is you have all those release forms. It doesn't hurt you, especially if you plan on putting it on the theaters. You want errors and omissions insurance, and a lot of people especially at the independent level, you start talking about insurance and release forms, and they're like, oh man, dude, you got to get that stuff done. I mean, now the plan was to get E&O insurance for appointment with Mr. E, but and we were going for it. In fact, I'd got a good deal for it, but then we ran into all those stumbling blocks with releasing it. So, and then come to find out, like a pivotal scene in the film, where I was living in Savannah, I had this spectacular view of St. John the Baptist Cathedral in Savannah, and I mean it was like it was like a corner office building, but it was actually my bedroom, and it was a spectacular. I mean, it was like you would expect to see in a movie, with the big glass office, in the corner office.
Sure.
Okay, so I had this, and then I had that view, and I was, the whole time I was writing the film, I said, some way, somehow, I have to get this into the film, right? So I did that, and I made that the office where the consultancy was, where Evil was having this consultancy. Well, it was my bedroom. It was small, but I made it look like this huge office, But the thing is, so I got the cathedral in the background, and the person that was taking care of all the release forms didn't get the release for that. So the movie had been made, it had been shown in a couple of screenings. By that point, I hadn't put it on the festival circuits yet, and I was going through the paperwork, because I was trying to get ready to put in some festivals, and I noticed there wasn't a release form for that, and I said, let me give these people a call and see what was up. So I contacted the Archdiocese there, and they put me in touch with the Monsignor, and so he said, just send us a copy, we'll take a look at it. And I'm like, oh crap, because it was, we talked about God and the Evil talks to this guy about God and the relationship to I mean, not in a religious way, but but still, he's like because the premise was that Evil knows God personally, so I mean
sure.
They sit down and here's two guys that sit down to breakfast every morning, so when this guy starts talking about God, dude calls him out on it, so we got that, and then there's obviously some pretty salty language in there, and there's some violence, and there's one particular scene that I won't mention. You have to see it to understand it. And I was like, man, this is going to be, they might not approve, they might give it the thumbs down, And the thing is, if that scene is not in there, the whole movie's dead, because
right.
So I sent them a tape and sweated it out for the 2 weeks I waited for them to get back to me, and they loved it. So, and they gave me the, they signed off on it. So I was like, I put all that in put all that paperwork away, and and the thing is, if I hadn't caught that, And the thing is, it's a famous cathedral, so somebody would have seen it, and somebody would have said something. So now, you know, when it gets released, finally gets released, somebody says something to him, I'll be able to show him that paperwork and say, hey, he signed off on it. Leave me alone. Go ahead.
Well, I will give you a cheat hint that I found out about getting those kinds of clearances. And one of the things that you do is when you call them up, you say, and if they say, well, they always say, not if they say, they always say, well, we want to take a look at it. And they want to take a look at it to make sure that you're not doing something. And so whenever I ask, I always say, who do I address this to? And could you tell me whose name would go in the credits in the special thanks so that we could at least have it on file? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, somebody goes, well, yeah, okay, fine. And sometimes you have to stroke somebody, like you said about getting the money. Sometimes you just have to, do the right thing,
And don't think that his name didn't end up in the credits.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly it. and sometimes that's even
special things,
Yeah, and sometimes that becomes just as important as getting the clearance.
Oh yeah.
So we're down to a little less than 10 minutes. Let's talk about what you're working on right now. Anything special in the works?
Right now, the latest thing that came out is a collaborative work we did on the BSFS called The Dark God's Gift. Myself and fellow BSFS member and author Ronald T. Jones, we put out a couple of stories based on mature stories, science fiction and fantasy, where based around a central theme of an immense and powerful evil that has been tossed into the multiverse and is basically going throughout existence, trying to gain ultimate knowledge so that one day it can come back and destroy its creator. And so we recently put those out, and those are up on the BSFS, the Dark God's Gift page. And I reached out to some authors, and there was some skepticism, but we went on and got this thing anyway, and it came out really well. Out really well. And going to be, now that volume's done, early next year, I'm going to be reaching out to a new set of authors, and we're going to keep it around the same theme. But the cool thing about the story itself is it's not, even though I set up the central theme, it's whatever the parameters are based are loosely based on what I set up, but the author has pretty much free reign to take this thing in the direction they want to go. In fact, I thoroughly encourage them to, the weirder and wilder and stranger, the better. But the one thing I try to push for is like authors that who have some work out already that people have seen, and that they, and I try to get them to use characters that like their main characters, kind of like my version of Marvel team up, Marvel DC team up, and the stories they don't have any direct relationship to any timeline, in the author's universe or storylines or anything. It's just this kind of this one-off where they encounter this thing and the effects that and how that how their character deals with the situation and how things go. And usually and because this thing is so powerful and so evil, there's always bad repercussions one way or the other. So far it's been really fun doing that. And like I said, I'll be reaching out to a new set of authors for Volume 2. And then last but not least, I'm currently scrambling to get my stuff together. I'm looking to go back to school and get my PhD in digital media. So I figured it's high time. It's been 10 years since graduate school. I figure if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. So that's the next phase. In between time of writing more books, I'm already putting notes together for my fourth book, and I've got notes for the next season of The Priestess and the Pandora Ultimatum, all set up. So there's plenty of stuff coming down the pipe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now for the collaborative works that you're putting together, excuse me, do you eventually see maybe collecting that and publishing, maybe in hardcover, putting together a book?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. If at the minimum, it'll probably be like ebook or Kindle or something like that. Because the main thing I want to do is to, especially I've been reaching out to the BSFS first because there's a lot of talent here, and there are a lot of authors who are making their name outright, and my thing is to help spread the word, and the Dark God's Gift is just another way to do that and have fun writing stories. And another thing too, the way they've been turning out, I haven't really seen stories like this, So so it's just another way to kind of poke some folks in the eye, like because the next wave, Quasi kept the next wave of authors and media and films and stuff is coming out of something like the BSFS. I mean, this is like the nuclear seed, and all it's going to take is a couple more electrons hitting in the right spot, and this thing's going to blow wide open. And and anybody who's not ready for it, is just going to get left behind. So.
Well, we've had discussions with various guests, about where Afrofuturism itself is going, and I haven't been shy at all about explaining my belief that at this point, I think that we're right on the verge of, just as you said, something very significant happening with the genre, and with in particular with black science fiction, fantasy, horror, in terms of trying to go out and breaking the racial threshold, where we're not just writing for us or by us for us, the FUBU concept, where the breakout is going to be much, much broader, and it's going to have broad market appeal, which is something that I think we should all shoot for. I'll be honest with you, anybody who wants to write for that collective should contact you at the site. They should get in touch with you. They should submit. They should talk to you about it, because these things are just going to get bigger, and they're going to get better. And the fact of the matter is, they're going to be more and more visible. It's just a matter of time. So I think that's a pretty laudable project for people to think about glomming onto, because it's going to be much, much larger and much, much more significant than you just writing, and when I say you, I mean the editorial you just writing a single story, okay, a single short story, okay, and that's not to say anything bad about people writing short stories, but I swear to you, I see it so clearly, the fact that you have so many people who are so interested in the work of black creatives in a way that hasn't occurred before, and I think it's just a matter of time. I hate to put a close to the show, but
all things must come.
We're coming up to a couple minutes here, man. I want to thank you first of all for showing up, giving your usual 110%, and you made it very easy. All of these things that Wolfgang talks about, he is on the site all the time, and join these groups that he has put together. They are some of the most creative universes that you can latch onto, and I think that those sorts of things are just going to grow. And hey, do you go to any conferences or any of these conventions or anything like that?
I haven't been, but these next this next year I'm going to start heading out for these things because it's fine. But my main thing is I wanted to have a body of work before I started running out there. So
yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, but it doesn't hurt to let people know you're around. And so, you know, as I tell all the other guests, you know, anytime you're going to have an appearance someplace, please put it on the events calendar at BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website, so that people who are out and about looking for things to do in their neighborhood might be able to find, you know, H. Wolfgang Porter and either talk to him about the mature subjects that he puts in his movies or anything else that comes to mind. Man, I want to thank you, and I want to turn it over to Jarvis, our esteemed creator of this entire universe, BlackScienceFictionSociety.com. What you got for us, Jarvis?
Hey, people. I just, as always, man, I'm so thankful for everyone that participates, everyone that comes here, everyone that posts, responds to posts, tunes into the show. It's amazing to me to have other like-minded people in one place working together on things. And I want to encourage everybody to continue to support the site, and we'll do our best to continue to support you and highlight you and push this whole black sci-fi genre to the forefront. And thanks particularly to you, Wolfgang, for you've been in the game here for a number of years, supporting everything that we do on the site, and it's appreciated. It really is. And
absolutely.
Always, Brother William, for making the show very interesting, as always. And like I say, everybody that's within the range of this show, I want to thank you for participating and encourage you to continue to come here and share what you're doing with us. And with that, I'm going to have to turn off for tonight.
Before you go, one last thing. For those of you who may not know, the second edition of Genesis, the science fiction anthology from writers from the site, is currently out and on sale. So check that out on the homepage of BSFS. This is the second edition. It's how many pages? 600 pages?
628 pages, which is about twice as much, extra 300 from the first one.
Oh, all right. So check that out. Support the site. Pick it up. There's a lot of good works in there. And thank you very much. And I guess I'm going to wish everybody a good evening.
All right. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.